Hello, this is Debbie with Living the Hobby Farm Dream podcast. Welcome to today's podcast. We'd like to ask you to please follow us on Spotify. It really helps. You can also follow us on YouTube on hobbyfarmdream.com. And we ask that for your support, and we really appreciate any support that you've given to us by listening to our podcasts and sharing them and downloading them. It makes a big difference, and we really appreciate it. Today's episode is episode 10, and it's going to be tips for canning fruit. When we say canning fruit, we're talking about canning actual whole or half fruit and also making fruit jams and jellies. Our canning journey started as a young married couple when we were in our 20s, when we had one son. We lived in Oregon while going to school, and during the summers there was lots of fresh fruit to eat and can. And we canned pickles and cherries, and I entered my canned Bing cherries in the Multnomah County, Oregon Fair, and I won a blue ribbon. It was the first blue ribbon I'd ever won in my life, and I was hooked on canning. I had also grown up eating my maternal grandma's homemade apricots, apricot jam, and fruit leather, which I absolutely loved. And my husband grew up with his mother making a lot of canned foods. After I was married, then I also enjoyed my mother-in-law's canned peaches, pears, and fruit leather. Our first tip when canning is buying the most recent Ball canning book for reference. There's also a lot of canning videos online, but I found that this canning book by Ball has been really helpful if you can get the newest one. I believe it's 2020 when it was published. It has the most recent things about canning. It's a great resource from the Ball Canning Company, which has been around for a long time. And just to give you a little bit of history about the Ball Canning Company, they've been around for about 140 years. They started home canning jars in 1884 in Buffalo, New York. It was two brothers in 1880 as a tin container company, and then they shifted to glass to avoid corrosion because they found there was some corrosion in the tin containers. They incorporated as the Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing Company in 1886, so they started a long time ago. After a while, in 1913, they introduced the Perfect Mason jar. The very original Ball Corporation moved into other industries, but Ball brand home canning products are currently licensed and produced by Newell Brands. They're still really high quality, and you can depend on them to withstand the higher heats that you need when you are canning. And so they're a great choice. There are some other ones out there too, but just be really careful about what you choose to can with. Some of the first fruits that we learned how to can were cherries, peaches, apricots, and pears. And the first jams that we learned how to make were apricot, peach, strawberry, and blackberry. And some of those things were readily available up in Oregon where we lived. But also we could get them in Arizona when we lived in Arizona, and out of Utah and other places that we could get fresh fruit. Fruits are considered low acid, so they can be safely canned using the water bath method, which simply means that after boiling the fruit, sugar, and pectin and putting it into high-quality glass jars with lids and rings, that you cover them with water and boil them for 15 to 25 minutes, depending on if you're making pints or quarts. Now, this is done to seal the lids onto the glass jars so the fruits will be shelf-stable, and that just means that they will last on the shelf without being refrigerated. Most jams are made with pectin, which is, if you don't know what pectin is a natural water-soluble fiber that's found in plant cell walls. It's especially found in their peelings and cores and acts as a thickening agent when you're making jam. And it's essential for setting like jams and jellies, so you need to have some pectin for that. You can buy pectin in a box or a packet by the canning products at most grocery stores. I've also used chia seeds. They can also act as a thickening agent in some jams, and those will work if you're not wanting to use the pectin. Also, a lot of people will cook their jams and jellies for longer periods of time, and so they wouldn't have to use pectin, but I've found that it's just much easier, and I'm more successful if I use the pectin. The basic steps for making cooked jam are, first thing is you're going to wash and sterilize the jars. Make sure you have new lids, and you can reuse the rings, and you boil those in hot water. Then you only use quality glass jars, like I said, like Ball brand, or there's Kerr brand that have been around for a long time. Make sure that the glass jars do not have any cracks or broken parts along the rim of the jar. That's really important because they won't seal and they could explode if they're not nice well-kept jars. They can be jars you've used before, but make sure you check them to make sure there's no cracks or any kind of broken parts along the rim. The second thing you need to do is wash and core the fruit. Chop into small pieces, slices, or halves as desired. Then you're going to add the sugar to the fruit. Many recipes can be modified, use less sugar, but first check your recipe on the pectin. You can buy low sugar pectin at the store, and I've used that before if you don't want to use lots of sugar like it usually has for jam. And I've seen that under Ball and some other brands also, that you can get the lower sugar pectin, which uses about half the amount of sugar. Normally to make jams, you use about 7 cups of sugar, and so it's about half that. It's about 3.5 cups for the low sugar pectin that you can get at the store. Number 4 is to stir the sugar, fruit, and pectin all together and cook to a rolling boil. It would boil for 1 minute, and then number 5, you would ladle the hot jam into the clean jars. You wipe the edges of the jar and place the new lids and rings on the jar, and then you would tighten the lids. Then number 6, you would put the jars into a large pot with the jars covered with water. Boil for 15 minutes for pints and 25 minutes for quarts. Make sure that you do that water bath method so that you can seal your jars. And number 7 is to remove the jars from the large pot and set on a cloth on the counter to cool. You will hear a popping sound if the lids are sealed. If for some reason they are not sealed, you will need to boil them longer or replace the lid with a new one and boil longer. Another alternative is to store the unsealed jar in the refrigerator. If it does not seal, number 8, if it does not seal, there's a possibility of mold. It is dangerous to eat the jam if it has gone moldy because of botulism. So make sure if it doesn't seal, you either put it back on the stove and boil it some more or put it in your fridge, because you'll have mold and other problems if you don't. Also, making freezer jam is something else that you can do. We're not going to talk about that exactly today, but it's another way to make homemade jam. It is not cooked over the stove, but it's stored in the freezer. It has a really fresh taste, and it's very delicious, and freezer jam recipes can be found on the pectin box. So that's another way that you can make jam. And if you're interested in canning fruit, it is also very easy. And here are some basic instructions, kind of similar to canning jams and jellies. First, you will need the quart jars again, fresh washed fruit that is peeled and left whole or cut into halves or slices. Number 1, after washing, peeling, and cutting the fruit, you'll place it into your clean jars. Number 2, on the stove, you'll add the sugar with water and make it more like a syrup. Then your canning book can give you the exact measurements that you need. And number 3, after bringing the syrup to a boil, you will ladle it over the fruit in the jars that you've already put the fruit in the jars. So number 4, then you'll wipe the jars to remove any syrup or juice that you might have dripped on the top. And then you'll add the new lids and rings and tighten the rings. And the reason why you have to wipe the top of the jars again for any syrup or any juice at all from the fruit is because it won't seal, and that's really important that the lid seals. So make sure you do that and don't skip that step. Number 5, last you will boil the quart jars in a large pot, covering the jars with water. Quarts, again, will need to be boiled for 25 minutes. And normally, that's what most people do for fruit. They want more to feed a family or to last for a few days. So using quart jars for fruit, especially large fruit, is really important, and so that you'll have plenty for your family. And number 6, after 25 minutes, you're going to remove the jars to a cloth. Then you'll again hear the popping sounds if the lids have sealed. If for some reason they are not sealed, you need again to boil them longer or replace the lid with a new one and boil longer. If you don't want to do that and you're just done, then you can put it in the fridge and you still can eat that later in the fridge. Just do not store it on the shelf because it will not be shelf stable, and there's a fear of mold and botulism. Now, jams and jellies and canned fruit are the easiest things to make when you're first starting to learn about canning. That's the first things that we started with, because you don't have to have a pressure cooker. You can do it all on the stove. You can do it with simple things. All you'll need is the bottles, the lids, and the rings, and your cut up fruit and sugar and pectin. And so it's really simple to do. With jellies, you can also make that with juice. Always make sure your jars are high quality, like I said, and your fruit is fresh and not overripe for the best results. Sometimes I've done fruit that it was a little too ripe, and just recently I pulled out some peaches that I had done that were getting a little too ripe, and the peaches were mushy. And if you want the peaches to be a little bit firm but soft, then you need to do them when they're at the perfect ripeness and not overripe, because it makes a difference in the quality and how they turn out when you cook them. Some examples of fruits that are easy to use for making jam include apricots, peaches, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, pretty much any kind of berries make great jam. Pears, apples, and plums, all of those things I've used to make jelly or jam for our family, and they taste delicious and they're easy to work with. With the apricots, you'll leave the skins on. The peaches, we peel the skins off. And the pears, we peel the skins off, and also the apples and the plums. So those are some easy ones to use for making jams. The best ones we found for making jellies, which is just without the skins or without the pulps. It's just more like the juice of them. And some of those that you can use are grapes. You can use grapes and peel those, or you can use grape juice, which I've used to make grape jelly, and it makes awesome, really good tasting grape jelly. You can also do strawberries, cherries, oranges, apples, and other tropical fruits. Keep in mind that some fruits that you can, like apricots, peaches, apples, or pears, may call for lemon juice because that keeps the fruit from turning brown. Also, you can use citric acid, which I put that, and I put lemon on those fruits to keep them from turning brown. And it doesn't take very much, it just takes a little bit, and it makes them look a lot more pretty in the jars. If you don't care about that, if you don't care about them turning brown, you don't have to use any of that stuff. If you want to be more natural, you can use the lemon juice. With the lemon juice, you have to be careful not to add too much so that you don't make them taste sour. Great fruits for canning whole fruit that are easy to do are things like apples, apricots, peaches, pears, and cherries. With pears, I've cut them in half. It's a little bit easier, but I have done apricots whole, and I've done peaches whole and also cut in half. And of course, apples and apricots, peaches, pears, and cherries all are really, really good for canning, and they work out really, really well and turn out really pretty. One of the most important things to remember when you make canned fruit, jams, or jellies, make sure that you make the kind that your family likes. You don't want to do all that work and make canned fruit or jam and no one will eat it. I've had times where I made way too much for my family and they didn't eat all that was there, and it didn't get eaten in the year's time that was after it was made. And so some had to be thrown out. And that's always makes you feel like you kind of wasted your time and wasted your money. So make sure that you find out what your family likes and that you make sure and pull it out and serve it to your family, and so that it will get eaten and your family will enjoy it, so that you don't have to waste your time or your money. A great thing about homemade fruit jams and jellies is not only do they taste delicious, but they are shelf stable for 1 year for optimal quality. So that's something that you can put on your shelf and that you can have when you need it, to put on homemade bread or to have for breakfast or even as a dessert on ice cream, anything like that your family enjoys. And it tastes so good, so much different than anything else that you would ever have. Always check the jars periodically over the year storage time, just to make sure that they're still sealed and they have no mold on them when opened. Do not eat the fruit or jams or jellies if they are not sealed or have mold. It is not worth getting botulism. So make sure that they're still sealed. I've had times where I thought that I had sealed them. They seemed like they were sealed at the time I made them, and then 6 months later, when we went to pull them out, they were not quite sealed anymore, and there was mold inside, and so I had to throw that away. So make sure you check that really closely. Don't just scrape off the mold and eat it, because there's a fear of getting botulism. And the great thing about homemade fruit, jams, and jellies is that they make great gifts to give people for the holidays. Many, many times over the years, we've given a loaf of homemade bread and some homemade jam to friends and family for the holidays. And it's been fun to give something that you made yourself and that people really, really enjoy and like the idea that you made that. Recently, I attended a craft fair at Christmas time, and it was a place where we could sell the things that we had made. And I had some homemade apricot jam in little pints, and it was made with really delicious apricots, and it sold out so quickly. And it's because I had a taste of the jam there with some crackers, and they were able to try it. And as soon as they tried it, they're like, wow, I want to buy some of this jam. So homemade jam is also something that you could make and sell. Everyone likes it. It tastes so much better than anything else you could buy. So make sure that you give it a try, because I promise you it'll be worth it, and your family and everybody will love it. We have enjoyed canning fruit and jams and jellies over the years, and we continue to do it every year. That's been about 38 years since we started doing canning of fruit and jam, and we do it every single year. We at least do strawberry and apricot. Sometimes we've branched out and done grape and berries, and also one of our very favorites is pear jam. You can add cinnamon to that. There's other things you can add. For our peaches, we've added cinnamon sticks. You can make all kinds of jams and jellies, so make sure you get a book and try what you like and what your family likes. It's a fantastic feeling to know that you put food on the table for your family and on the shelf, and you take pride in the fact that you canned it yourself. Sometimes you can even grow it in your garden and can it yourself, or in your yard on a fruit tree. But even if you buy the fruit or get it from your local farm, it makes you feel fantastic that you canned it yourself. You know what went into the fruit, into the jam or jelly, and especially how great that it tastes. After you taste the homemade, you will not want to go back to the store-bought. I promise nothing compares. One of our very favorite breakfasts, or any time of the day, is homemade bread, whatever kind you like, with homemade jam or jelly on it. It makes a very, very best breakfast. And also eating that canned fruit in the middle of summer or over the winter, it tastes fantastic. And you can put it on cottage cheese or whatever you like, and it's wonderful. So hope that you'll give it a try, canning fruit and canning your jams and getting those ready for your family and to give away as gifts also. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you would please, again, follow our show on Spotify or on YouTube. It really helps a lot, and we're grateful for you for listening. We hope that you'll listen in next time for our episode 11. I will be interviewing my longtime friend Carolyn, and she has bought some dairy cows in the last few years, and we're going to be asking her some questions about her dairy cows and what she's learned. And so we hope that you'll tune in to episode 11 about dairy cows and all about buying a dairy cow and what to do and how to prepare for that and the things that she's learned. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for listening to our podcast.